On today's episode, I have an existential crisis over the implications of unbridled philanthropy.
And I'm in the market for mushrooms.
My name's Taylor.
Hi, I'm Chris, and welcome to episode 4 of Commander Role Reversal.
It's already episode 4.
I don't know. Time flies, man.
We got there. When you're having fun watching YouTube, because this is a YouTube channel, please remember to like, subscribe, and enjoy by sharing with a friend and commenting.
We'll be sure to include the link for the deck lists on Moxfield in the description below. Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Let's get into the episode. So, Chris, I think you won. First, congrats. We got it on the record. I'm not a terrible deck builder. You won a game.
I figured out how to pilot this one. I figured out how to get a win. It was awesome.
What was that deck that you won with?
I am super excited to talk to you about Thelon of Havenwood.
Nice.
Thelon of Havenwood, green for a legendary creature, elf druid. Each fungus creature gets +1/+1 for each spore counter on it. Black and a green. Exile a fungus card from a graveyard. Put a spore counter on each fungus on the battlefield. It's a 2/2.
It is a 2/2.
So when I went into this, I was expecting, fungus things like...
What does that even mean?
Tokens, counters.
Yeah, etc.
I did not know that I would need an abacus to keep track of what was happening with this deck.
I made an abacus deck.
You totally did. There were so many triggers to keep track of. It was wicked fun. I would caution anybody building this deck, make sure you play it early on in the night where you can, still have the attentiveness to keep track of everything, because there's a lot going on.
Definitely not a post 10 p.m. Sunday night Magic game. Would not recommend.
Yeah, but it was fun, man. It was so good. You definitely accomplished the tokens and counters themes and then some. There was a little bit of aristocrats, which I didn't really, think about. Made sense, but yeah, a lot of go wide token strategies, just making them bigger. It was powerful. It was fun.
Yeah. Would you say that it grew on you?
I would say that. I would.
That's good.
That would be a thing that I would say.
I'm terrible. I reused that from the last episode. No Seedborn Muse in this episode.
Well, wanted to talk about a few of the cards, a few of the plays, kind of give you an idea of like how the deck played. One of the cards that stood out was Wrenn. Wrenn 7 in this case.
Oh my.
Wrenn 7 is a legendary planeswalker, which has a +1 ability to reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all land cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Has a 0. Put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Has a -3. Create a treefolk creature token with reach, and this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. And the ultimate ability, -8. Return all permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. You get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. Starts with 5 loyalty.
That's a lot of stuff for 5 mana.
There's a lot of abilities going on. And the main reason that I wanted to talk about this is I think it's just a really, really good planeswalker. Planeswalkers tend to have a tougher time in Commander with multiple opponents, but it immediately replaces itself.
Right.
When you +1, you get some lands, and the main reason that I wanted to talk about it was that in one game, I actually got to Ultimate Wrenn 2 times.
I'm still mad about it.
There with all the +1/+1 counters, you were kind enough to build in proliferate synergies, which was really the way to get there multiple times. But how did I do it twice? Well, with a little card called Fungal Rebirth.
Oh, God.
Fungal Rebirth, 2 and a green for an instant return. Target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If a creature died this turn, create 2 1/1 green Sapperling creature tokens. So it has the token built in. Really good. You could just put in any of those sort of regrowth effects, but this one actually has some synergy with the deck as well.
That was the thought. Who doesn't like Sapperlings? And it seemed on theme. The Sapperling eventually became 7 in my headcanon. Because of the tree? Is that how that works?
I think that's exactly how that works.
Let us know, Vorthos people out there, please.
Wrenn and 8, 9, 10.
There's a joke about 8, 7, 8, 9. No, whatever. numbers.
So I brought Ren and 7 back. I ultimated again. I brought everything back from my graveyard. There was a lot of value to be had with that particular game.
So was it after the first ult or the second that you needed the Abacus?
Yeah, it was. I think it was. No, it was throughout, man. That was on the upkeep that I needed the Abacus. I didn't even cast it yet.
Fair. Lots of upkeep triggers.
There were a couple more cards that this was actually how I got to the win in one of the games. It was how I thought I was going to win, and then how I actually did it. So we had a card on the battlefield called Epic Struggle.
There it is.
2, a green and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more creatures, you win the game. Pretty epic.
Oh, gosh.
The struggle was not that hard, actually, to get to 20 creatures in this deck.
Yeah, that was the idea. Mark Rosewater. I'm just going to say his name.
Morrow.
Petitioning to make a dual modal face card version of that where the backside is epic fail.
Maybe it's an uncard. Maybe it's
Yeah.
silver border.
If you have 19 creatures on the board at any time, you lose the game.
It's a flavor win, at least.
Don't let me design cards, please.
So how did I get to 20 creatures in this particular case? With a little card called Mycoloth. Mycoloth. It's 3 a green and a green for a creature fungus. Devour 2. As this enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. This creature enters the battlefield with twice as many +1/+1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token for each +1/+1 counter on Mycoloth. It's 4/4.
Oh my gosh.
So you're making all of these tokens, and then Mycoloth just comes in and eats them all.
Yep.
Making all of those into +1/+1 counters, which then make more saplings on the next.
I mean, I don't normally play green, but I feel like this would be a card that's just generically good. You don't even need the tribal support for it. Like, that's a lot of bodies.
It is. Anything that's going wide, you're removing them for one turn.
Yeah.
Right, and then they come right back.
Yeah, I guess just keeping it alive.
Yeah, that's the key. That's true. The cherry on top, however, was the Ozolith.
There it is.
Having all of those +1/+1 counters that were on all of said tokens that got eaten by Mycoloth. The Ozolith is a legendary artifact for 1 generic mana. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may remove all counters from the Ozolith, move them onto a target creature.
I like to imagine that the Ozolith had a bunch of like fungus growing on it because it picked up those spore counters too.
Yeah, it did. It's all counters. Yeah. That's awesome.
Gross.
Yeah. So with those 3 cards together, Mycoloth got, I'm just going to call him Mike.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yo, Mike.
Michael got real big, and then next turn just the upkeeps happened, and that was the game. It was pretty satisfying. I've never played Epic Struggle in a deck before, but this was one way to make it work.
Yeah, I think what would hurt a little bit more for me is at the time I had 2 Aetherflux reservoirs on the board, and you still won. So it was epic. It did flavor win, as you said.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, what a great game where, it's like right up until those last couple of turns, it could have gone either way.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Really, really cool. I had just 2 more cards that I wanted to mention that stood out to me in particular. There was a card, Descendant's Path. Descendant's Path is 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card that shares a creature type with a creature you control, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you don't cast it, put it on the bottom of your library. Really cool tribal card. There are enough cards in green where you can know what the top card of your library is too. And the other card that this paired really well with was Sylvan Anthem. Green and a green enchantment. Green creatures you can control get +1/+1. Whenever a green creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can scry one.
Did you resolve all those scry triggers from Mycoloth before you won the game? Because I want to redo it now.
Scry one, 20 times.
Because it's for all the tokens too, right?
Yeah, it would be.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that was really like the way that it synergized really well in this deck was for anybody who hasn't played fungus counters before, most of the creatures that have fungus counters, you remove usually 3 and then you create a 1/1 saproling. So you can do that at instant speed. You can scry before your upkeep triggers, and you're able to like ensure that you're getting that payoff with Descendant's Path as well. Great synergies, man. Really well done.
Thanks. I learned from the best.
No. That was
wholesome. Don't get used to it. Don't get used to it.
Would you believe that he's my arch nemesis on the battlefield?
I would. every Thursday.
Awesome. Well, Taylor, what about you? What about your play experience?
It was a lot of fun. So I had Zedruu the Greathearted, who I've always referred to as the GOAT, but quickly learned that he's not a GOAT. He's one generic blue, red, white for a legendary creature, Minotaur Monk, that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life, draw X cards, where X is the number of permanents you own that your opponents control. It has an activated ability of blue, red, white. Target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. He's a 2/4. So I think I was really excited about this deck because it's one of those names where the reputation, I feel, kind of precedes it.
Sure.
I'd never played with it. I've never played against it in any of the pods. So I knew that it kind of was known as either group hug to the fullest extent of that, or maybe group slug, a little bit of a bad Santa situation, I think. Krampus, if you will. Oh my gosh, goat, Krampus, it works.
It's all coming together.
We did it. But I think it lived up to that. More of the Krampus, I would say. There definitely weren't many nice things that I would give to you, and that was really my only struggle with the deck. Was some of the things were so mean that I had reservations about giving them to you. So good job, I think.
Mission accomplished.
We did it. I definitely didn't give you any land, so it didn't play out like that. But
you could have.
I could have. I didn't. You were in Golgari. You had plenty of land. But I think power level, it definitely did. It did live up to its reputation. I kind of liked it in that a lot of commanders kind of just finish out the game, themselves, whether it's Voltron, whether they're like actually pinging damage based off of aristocrat strategy, things like that. I felt that it was interesting because this deck is really as strong as the shell that you build it around. And so really the power level is limited only by your imagination. And I think that you definitely had some creative things that you put in there. Namely Pyromancer's Swath, which was 2 in a red for an enchantment that reads, if an instant or sorcery source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus 2 to that permanent or player instead. But we don't care about that.
That part doesn't matter.
I don't think I played any instants or sorceries that dealt damage, at least, because at the beginning of each end step, it also reads discard your hand. I did so many double takes playing this deck. That also not one I would suggest for 10 p.m. Magic on a Sunday night. But I had that in my opening hand. And I was like, what do I do with this? I have 3 mana. I'm not going to play it because I want to play. And then I was like, oh my God, he wants me to give it to him. So really, you're just a masochist. I think. You built this.
I wanted to see that work, and oh my gosh, early game, that's such a feel bad for your opponents, but it's such a advantage, if you're trying to win. Commander's not always about winning, but when you're playing this
But
card.
When you do it, you make sure they never want to play again. That's good food for thought, and especially for Thought Lash, which is they only get smoother, folks. It's an enchantment for 2 blue, cumulative upkeep, which is something that you don't see every day. Exile the top card of your library. So cumulative upkeep reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, put an age counter on this permanent, then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each age counter on it. When a player doesn't pay Thought Lash's cumulative upkeep, that player exiles all cards from their library. And then it also has the I'm sorry, I can't get over that. Exile all cards from your library. Exile the top card of your library is an activated ability, and then prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to you this turn. I don't care about that. I care about giving this to you after the cumulative upkeep is such that you would never want to pay it, couldn't pay it, and then you exile your entire library.
Yeah.
Which actually, that's not how it ended up working. I think you just put it in there as a mill piece because you were running a couple of the Labman combos, weren't you?
That's right. Yeah, this card actually has multiple functions. You can definitely donate it and really kind of ensure that whoever has that isn't getting access to the top several cards of their library each turn. But it's also a way for paying 0 and exiling your deck when you have either a Laboratory Maniac or a Jace Wielder of Mysteries or a Thassa's Oracle on the field to win you the game when your library is empty, when you try to draw from an empty library. Which
admittedly, I didn't pick up on that at first. I was still like caught up in the allure of these ridiculous enchantments that do terrible things to people. But I did, when one of the games, draw into a lab man, and then it kind of was like, you're evil.
I love cards that have more than one function in the deck, though.
Yeah,
that's
it definitely does that, and that's kind of like a theme of at least my favorite synergy cards in this, because the next one was Chaos Warp, which is 2 and a red for an instant, classic commander red instant card that reads: the owner of a target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. I love this card just because I love chaos effects, but also this is so good in a deck where you want to chaos warp into some crazy bananas bonkers horrible thing that you can immediately donate. So that was my, it's there if you need it for the removal, if you need to get rid of that pesky planeswalker, for example. But being able to, or for example, if there's another card that had cumulative upkeep, I think there were a couple in there. That wasn't the only one. If I didn't necessarily want to pay that, like in a pinch, I'll just get rid of it and see what else I shuffle into.
Yeah, it's one of those rare times where you could cast it on your own permanence and profit from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does serve that. It definitely does serve that function. If I remember correctly, you actually got rid of a perplexing chimera with it because it was
it was too much.
The card is too much. Perplexing chimera says whenever a player casts a spell, you may exchange perplexing chimera with that spell. You can choose new targets for it.
Yeah, so maybe I really sugarcoated it as an intentional play it on your stuff, but in reality, I just couldn't deal with that anymore. It was too much. I was perplexed. I was vexed. And anything else that ends in ED. Back to reality. The reality chip, which is 2, 1 and a blue for a legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish. Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, baby. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. As long as the reality chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. It has the ability Reconfigure for 2 and a blue, and then once it's 2 and a blue, and then attach it to target creature you control or unattach from a creature. Reconfigure only as a sorcery. Well attached, this isn't a creature. 0/4. So essentially, it's a creature that can also be an equipment. Kind of a throwback to the Listed days, but less confusing.
Yeah, I really liked that new. Equipment has the downside of having to like pay the equip cost all the time, and it's when you're not paying the equip cost, a lot of times it's just sitting there, being an artifact. So having the creature on one side and being able to equip that creature, really good design space. Really interesting card.
I really loved it in this deck because it really felt like a build your own Bolas's Citadel kind of Aetherflux combo. in a deck that isn't running black and isn't running Bolas's Citadel, because that's exactly what I did. Another card that you had in here that I mentioned earlier in the episode was Aetherflux Reservoir, which is 4 for an artifact. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. Pay 50 life. Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to any target. I loved being able to kind of just pair the reality chip with, or put it on Zedruu, and then, kind of be able to relive kind of what you've done every time you play a mono black deck. And you pointed out even during the game, play lands off the top of your library. I completely overlooked that. I thought it was just like look at it and cast spells. So it's a lot of value that I don't typically expect to get that kind of effect in blue. So it was really cool.
Yeah, really powerful combo for sure. This deck, Zedruu, it's not really designed as a storm deck, which is traditionally what Aetherflux, where that usually fits. But part of Zerdru's upkeep trigger is to gain life equal to. So it does have a lot of capability of gaining that life. So, Aetherflux Reservoir, you can play it like you did and it worked great. But also you can just hold it up until you have, greater than 50 life and, finish off your last opponent with it.
See, I hear you say it's not a storm deck, but then I challenge you by playing Mirror Maid, which is 1 blue for an enchantment that reads, you may have Mirror Maid enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. It may not get there in a non-storm deck as 1 Aetherflux, but let's make 2 Death Stars. And that's exactly what I did. And it was very satisfying.
Yeah, perhaps it is a storm deck after all.
Yeah. But, jokes aside about that, I think this was a really clever include because being able to kind of just double down on whatever nasty enchantment that I've donated, and it's just one more thing that I could then donate while gaining benefit from Zerdru's ability, and then also whatever, I don't know what the value of having you discard your hand twice at the end step would be, but just knowing that that's an option in this deck it's a clever include.
Thanks. I think, some of them like that, the discard ability, it only affects one of your opponents, right? So being able to copy that and then give that to another opponent. Everybody's having fun here.
That's true. Oh
Everybody's having a great time. Nobody has any cards in their hand.
I just want to put it on the same player to send a message. Don't mess with me.
If you remove one, we got a backup.
But I digress. There was one more include that I thought was just wickedly clever. And admittedly, Chris, I have been trying to find a way to make this card work in my white decks for a very long time, and I couldn't figure it out. We're talking about your instant win combo with Transcendence. For 3 white enchantment. You don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. When you have 20 more or more life, you lose the game. Whenever you lose life, you gain 2 life for each 1 life you lost. Damage dealt to you causes you to lose life. And I even put in the show notes, stylish win con, all caps, because holy crow. I think the only problem is by the time I drew into this in the game that I ultimately end up losing to you, I had 2 Aetherfluxes on the board, so I couldn't play it without instantly losing. But I saw it and it was like, you absolute mad dad.
Yeah, it's definitely situational. You have to be at 19 life and all of your opponents have to be at 20 or more life. You also have to have 9 mana with 4 of them being white. So it's kind of an achievement in that way.
Yeah.
But we don't want to make winning too easy.
No. He says with epic win. Was it called Epic Struggle?
Oh, Epic Struggle.
A misleading name.
It wasn't that hard.
No, it wasn't. But it's just such a cool deck. I really enjoy a lot of the includes in here. But kind of moving back to Thelon for a second. I know that not everybody is, very familiar with Fungi Tribal or Fungus Tribal. So what were some of the cards that made you kind of do a double take?
There were a couple of cards I wanted to bring up and get your take on these. One card that you had included was an enchantment card by the name of Titania's Song. Titania's Song, 3 and a green for an enchantment. Each non-creature artifact loses all abilities and becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness each equal to its mana value. If Titania's Song leaves the battlefield, this effect continues until the end of turn. I actually really just wanted to call you out as a stacks player, even in green.
Listen, man, I've just got to say I was inspired to include this card because of something we had discussed last episode, and it was something of a familiar card. Karn Silver Golem, which is 5 mana for a legendary artifact creature Golem. Whenever Karn Silver Golem blocks or becomes blocked, it gets -4/+4 until end of turn. Pay 1 generic to target non-creature artifact. It becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its mana value until end of turn. Karn is a 4/4. But I digress.
You thought we weren't going to bring it up this episode. You thought, how could they possibly go 3 episodes with it?
Never doubt us. Mom. But in all seriousness, the more I think about that card, the more it's kind of opened up kind of what removal can be to me. And at least for this deck, when I was building it, I did want to kind of keep things on theme with like fungus. Like, as you pointed out, there could have been just an easy include with regrowth, but we went for fungal rebirth instead. Mm-hmm. This one, at least in my head, was kind of a way to deal with pesky artifacts that other players had without necessarily just running, Nature's Reclamation. I guess I could have run that. Nature. You're right. I'm just a stacks player.
Got him.
Yeah. Sugar.
I think. It is a powerful card, especially like the fact that it's green, and green doesn't tend to need to run a lot of artifacts. So yeah. Really cool. Really cool old card too. It was a cool one to see.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those that I did a double take when I was like looking on Scryfall for cards. I was like, what did this do? Yeah, it just shuts off all artifacts.
Oh, shuts off Aetherflux.
Shuts off Soul Ring. Womp womp. Does Mana Crypt just immediately die?
It does. It definitely does. It turns into a 0/0.
It's a 0/0 board wipe. Or a 0 mana artifact board wipe.
Yeah. Treasure tokens, right?
Brutal.
Yeah.
Calculated.
Get this card in your deck, people. If you've got a lot of artifacts, a lot of treasures running around.
The meta call, as Chris would say.
So Taylor, there was one other card that I wanted to ask you about. I was wondering about Ancient Green Warden. Ancient Green Warden's a green and a green for a creature elemental with reach. You may play land cards from your graveyard. If a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. It's a 5/7. I love this card. It's a great value in landfall, but I'm wondering if there might have been a synergy that I overlooked in this deck.
I'm glad that you said landfall, because I did, admittedly, it's only one card, but it was the Proliferate Enabler that you had mentioned earlier in the game. So in the event that you do have some lands in your graveyard, and you also have an Evolution Sage?
Evolution Sage.
Yeah, which is the landfall trigger on that card is anytime a land enters the battlefield, proliferate.
Yeah.
So
very nice.
Just, it might have been a little niche or narrow considering it wasn't a landfall deck, but I figured any opportunity to maximize the amount of fungus and spore counters would be nice. And not to mention, it triggers twice because of Ancient Green Warden, so you're proliferating twice.
2 times. That's really cool. I think what I like about combos like that is both of the cards individually are good in the deck, right? Yeah. And then when you get them together, it's just banana sandwich.
Would you believe banana sandwich? Yum, I think.
Yeah.
I'd like peanut butter?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I totally eat that.
Nice. I've had a peanut butter banana shake before.
Oh yeah, there's like plenty of protein. Was there ice cream in there, or was it more of a protein shake?
It was like a protein shake.
Nice.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
But I digress. Would you believe it if there was another combo with that card?
I would not believe that.
Okay.
Do tell.
Life and Limb. So 3 generic, 1 green for a 4 mana enchantment, I believe, that reads all lands and saprolings are forest land saprolings.
Right.
So it basically just turns all of your lands into creatures.
Right.
Which, if you have Sylvan Anthem out, you're scrying, you're doing it twice. Nice. And then also you're they're sapperlings, so you can, there are plenty of synergies in the deck that care about doing things with sapperlings. So if you wanted
to, also lands. Wow.
So you can just keep replaying them.
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
Yeah. Great job, man.
Yeah, we did it.
That was fun. Yeah, pat on the back. Those were some pretty interesting includes. So thanks for building that, for throwing those in there. Really cool. What about you, Taylor? Did you have some cards that stood out to you?
I did. I think the first one, was more of just a question because I didn't get a chance to play it in the game.
Sure.
So. Pramicon Sky Rampart, which is a blue, red, white legendary creature wall that reads Flying Defender. As Pramicon Sky Rampart enters the battlefield, choose left or right. Each player may attack only the nearest opponent in the chosen direction, and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. It's a 1/5. I think I'm going to go back and call you out as the stacks player because I feel like, as far as I could tell, this was just pure stacks.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
okay,
there's a few cards in there that are just designed to like control the play patterns and control the board, kind of stacksy. But yeah, Pramicon was really just in there to ensure that there were other like disincentivize cards that disincentivize attacking, such as Sphere of Safety, for example. There were a lot of enchantments in this, so I felt like the 5 mana for a white enchantment that says players can't attack you unless they pay mana equal to the number of enchantments you control.
For each attacking creature?
Gross. Was worth it. So Pramicon was just another version of that because, with Zedruu, you're not making a lot of friends when you're donating these things. So it's, if you can gain some advantage by directing the attacks or at least controlling the attacks,
that's
was
really
the goal
smart.
there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I just want to build that deck.
Yeah, seems like a cool build.
Cool. And the only other one that I wanted to ask about is, it's kind of funny because you kind of admitted earlier in the episode that it wasn't a Storm deck. So I guess I missed that memo because I did draw into at one point Archon of Emeria, which is 2 and a white for a creature Archon with flying that reads, each player can't cast more than one spell each turn. Non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped 2/3. So I didn't necessarily want to play this and give it to an opponent because I didn't want my things to enter the battlefield tapped, and I didn't want to play it because I was trying to storm off with 2 Aetherflux Reservoirs.
Yeah.
So it could have just been, any other handful of games I don't draw into the storm pieces and I draw into that, and that's just a good stacks value.
Sure. Yeah, the thing, Archon of Emeria is a card that maybe there were like a couple of directions that I was trying to take the deck when I was building it, and I was really focused more on I wanted to build a little bit of a stacks deck. You've inspired that in me.
We've already influenced each other. I'm doing sacrifice, you're doing stacks.
Yeah, this is how it happens. This is great.
No.
But there are a few cards in the deck where you made a good point with Archon of Emeria. You don't necessarily want your opponent to have it because your things enter the battlefield tapped, but the static effect where players can only play one spell. There were a few effects, the rule of law effects as they're called, which it doesn't matter which player has the card, it still affects the whole table. So you can still donate it, get the value off of the upkeep trigger, and it's still doing its thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a good lesson to take into consideration when you're looking at decks like these. They don't all need to be super fine-tuned into one strategy, because that's a card that I could play and get a lot of value out of if someone is outstorming me in something that isn't primarily a storm deck. So I still like it as an include.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of times we want to build like highly tuned decks that the goal is to win. And when I sit down at a table, I'm trying to win for sure, regardless of the deck.
I couldn't tell.
But on the other hand, sometimes it's fun to just put fun cards in that you don't get to play with too much.
We've come full circle because you just referred to Archon of Emeria as the fun card in this conversation. We did it.
Don't quote me on that.
Too late. It's immortalized. But I think kind of moving on from there, that was the only thing that I had for questionable cards, but I did want to hear if you had any suggestions for me for my my felony.
Yes,
First degree felony.
Really classic name there. Like that one's going to go down in the history books. Yeah,
Certainly the law books.
That's the great thing about having so many legal cards in the format. There's just really so many options, so many fun things to look through. As we've said in previous episodes, this is the best part, is like looking through and finding other cards that fit these synergies. So I had a couple, actually 3 cards I wanted to talk about today that I might suggest considering in a Thelon deck. Mm-hmm. The first card is Thelon Soothsayer. 3 and a black for a creature fungus. We're on theme there. Pay 2, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. It's a 2/3. You didn't leave a lot of fungus cards out of the deck. I wanted to try to find at least 1 or 2 that kind of did the aristocrats thing, and this one lets you draw a card too.
Yeah. I was looking at that, and ultimately the only reason I didn't go with it initially is because I was greedy and I didn't want a sack ability that required a mana investment. Yeah. But just drawing straight cards is never a bad thing, especially when it's only for 1.
Yeah. It's 2 in sacrifice, but yeah, you're right. It's not a free sacrifice outlet. Which is what we tend to want to gravitate towards. It's also a fungus. It's still kind of synergizing with the deck, even if you're not using the activated ability. It's just kind of there.
It's going to get large.
Yeah, definitely. So the next card I wanted to look at is not a fungus, not a sapperling. All right, so we're not doing the tribal thing with this card.
I'm sad.
But it ties in to another card that I wanted to talk about as well. We've got a creature from Kaladesh called Winding Constrictor. A black and a green for a creature snake. If 1 or more counters would be put on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1 of each of those kinds of counters are put on a permanent instead. If you would get 1 or more counters, you get that many +1 of each of those kinds of counters instead. It's a 2/3. I think they were going for energy counters mostly in Kaladesh, but...
Oh my god. I was looking at that. That's not just +1/+1 counters.
Right.
Spore counters!
Spore counters. Loyalty counters.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I want that in that deck now.
Nice. We can step outside the tribal theme for just this moment.
Just the one, yeah.
Cool, yeah. Plenty of fungus counters too, yeah.
Incredible. That's a good find. Kaladesh?
That was Kaladesh.
Oh, because of the energy counters. That makes sense.
Yeah, they were really pushing that energy theme. I hope they bring it back because it would be amazing to play an energy deck.
Modern Horizons 3.
Let's see it. Okay, the final card here that I wanted to mention as a possible inclusion is a card called Corpsejack Menace. Corpsejack Menace is 2, a black and a green for a creature fungus. We're back. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. It's a 4/4.
That's incredible. Why didn't I put that in the deck?
So, this one does fit the tribal theme. It does fit the +1/+1 counters. No spore counters. Maybe that's why it doesn't quite get there.
If it didn't say spore or sapperling, it didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a brilliant find.
Yeah, it doubles the counters. I just thought there aren't a lot of doubling abilities that are also on a fungus. So I had to bring it up.
Yeah, maybe cut. Yeah, because I think I had been considering doubling season and parallel lives and things like that. So that's just one more of that effect.
Yeah, it's the creature version essentially. Yeah,
that's also in Tribe. Okay, I'm sold.
Cool.
I'm sold.
All right, we got there.
You were in the market for mushrooms, but I just wanted to purchase. So is that how the free market works?
I think it is. Goods and services can be exchanged.
Thank you.
For money.
Speaking of exchange, oh my god, someone stop us. May I offer a few suggestions?
Please, I cannot wait to hear what you have to suggest.
So excited for this. We'll start off easy. Something called Harmless Offering, which is 2 and a red for a sorcery that reads target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. just a sorcery of Zedruu's activated ability that just lets you donate something. So
that's the one with the cutest little cat in the artwork.
The cutest little cat, but this was actually recently pointed out to me on Twitter, so thank you, Magic Twitter.
Big ups.
There's actually blood on the cat, and then the tail is not a regular cat tail. Have you ever noticed that? Ooh. It's got like a jaw on it, like because they were going through. I think that was the Eldritch Moon is the set that was from, so it was all Eldrazi.
That's really cool. I'm gonna have to look more closely.
I never noticed.
Looks like a cute.
Look at right here.
Looks like a cute image, but yeah, do not be fooled by that cat.
Yeah.
Not so harmless.
Yeah, not so harmless. So yeah, I mean that just seemed like a shoo-in.
Yeah.
Doing more of the donating thing. So
it's great to have more than one way to do that effect. For
sure.
I
mean, especially if you wanted to kind of maybe make sure that you immediately got some value out of Zedruu. Like you play that, donate something, and then get the commander out, so you don't have to then pay the activated ability. And that's a lot of mana for one turn, right? So kind of spreading it out.
It does. Yeah, it definitely does. And it's less color intensive too.
Yeah.
So
2 generic and a red.
Yeah. A lot of upside there.
Yeah.
Good find, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice.
Thanks, Cryfall. But that's about as wholesome as it gets. It's all downhill from here, which I think is what you're here for. I was inspired by your Thought Lash self-mill strat.
Sure.
So I was like, let's turn that up to 11 and adjust the levels, as it were, with Leveler.
Ooh, nice.
Which is 5 generic mana for an artifact creature Juggernaut that reads, when Leveler enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library. It's a 10/10. It's a 10/10. But I know what you're thinking. I have to play that and then I exile my library. So maybe it's not, it's not always going to be the optimal play. But hear me out. You also run Fractured Identity in this deck, which is 3 generic white-blue sorcery, exile target non-land permanent. Each player other than its controller creates a token that's a copy of it. So sure, you will exile your entire deck, but so will everybody else, and they'll have draw triggers ideally before you do.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, everybody exiles. They're like, nobody has access to cards, and then each of your opponents loses in order.
Yeah, you wanted to play the game? Nope. And I'm keeping it easy for the stat keepers out there. It's always kind of a bit cumbersome trying to know who won in what order.
Yeah. 4th place, 3rd place, 2nd place.
At that point, you just scoop up. Okay.
I think it also works, because you have a Jace and you have a lab man as well, so you could just win on the spot too.
Exactly. So that was the thought with that. I think
pretty mean, dude.
It is pretty mean. Would you believe it if it gets meaner?
I don't know how.
Let me tell you how. Sticking with the artifact theme, something called Lich's Tomb for 4. You know this one? Oh my gosh.
I'm excited.
It's an artifact that says, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. That seems like a pretty wholesome thing to donate to someone until you read the second part of it that says, whenever you lose life, sacrifice a permanent for each 1 life you lost. Damage causes life loss.
Wow. Right.
So you would, I think the only thing that gets tricky about that is that I guess you could just sacrifice that if it's donated, but I'm hoping that people are you did not just do that to realize that they could do that. But
they might take a lot more damage than just 1, right?
True.
So even on that turn, if they end up taking damage before they can sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
They would have to. They could sacrifice it and other permanents.
So it sounds pretty mean, but the sequencing does have to be there for it to actually do the thing that you want it to do. But yeah, it's pretty mean.
Yeah, I love it. The meaner, the better in this deck. That was the theme.
I do like that the way that it kind of maybe you don't necessarily want to sacrifice it immediately too is some people, depending on when this is played in the game, you don't lose the life. You don't lose the game if you have 0 life. That might be relevant for that player who like maybe just thinks that they need one more turn.
Sure.
But
so they're kind of like held hostage by that fact.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we have fun here.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun card. What else have we got?
So I've been yammering like there's no tomorrow about donating lands, and it got me thinking. Oh, you know, what if we actually do this?
What if?
So there's a little land that I like to call Glacial Chasm. Cumulative upkeep of pay 2 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an age counter on this permanent, then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each age counter on it. So 2, 4, 6, 8.
Right.
Not insignificant life loss if you're not running a life gain deck. But it also reads, when Glacial Chasm enters the battlefield, sacrifice a land. I mean, that is the cost I will have to pay for playing the land. But creatures you control can't attack. Prevent all damage that would be done to you. So it kind of just... if you don't run land destruction, you're just kind of bricked. You can't attack for the rest of the game. I mean, it is pretty terribly mean, I guess, but
that's not a card that you just put in a deck. Like that's not like a card that I would put in a deck unless I was building around it.
Yeah.
Or if I wanted to donate it to somebody.
Yeah,
else.
because you donate it, right? Like it's the long con, because you donate it under the assumption they don't have the ability to deal with land, because social contract, you don't really want to mess with people's lands.
Sure.
And sure, it prevents all damage that would be dealt to you, but you're paying 2 life on the cumulative upkeep. So it's not like it's just you're going to make the game last forever. They are going to eventually, have to pay that life.
Yeah, it's an inevitability.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. On a land, too. I suppose they can tap it for mana, right? If there's
Nope.
Oh, no. It doesn't even tap for mana.
Yep.
That is just a brick.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. We're mean. Last one. I was inspired by... the blue and the red enchantments that I saw that were worthy of donating to another player. And it got me thinking I need to find one that is white that is worthy of the Bad Santa moniker.
Yeah, love it.
Let me introduce you to Enduring Renewal, which is 2 white for an enchantment that says play with your hand revealed. If you would draw a card, reveal the top card of your library instead. If it's a creature card, put it into your graveyard. Otherwise, draw a card. Whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand.
Oh, that's really cool.
So you're only playing that on someone that doesn't ideally have any creatures on the battlefield, and then they just aren't going to draw one ever again.
Yeah. Again, that's another one of the cards when you put it in your deck, you're definitely building around it, right? So when, surprise, you have control of this permanent, that's just going to shut you down.
Yeah.
That's a mean one.
Yeah.
That's putting it, that's like over the top mean, because you're putting somebody who's already at a disadvantage, already doesn't have a board state.
Listen, man. No, it's not mean. It's doing the table a favor, because now they can see all the removal that player has in hand.
Oh, see. Yeah, it's information for the table.
I'm doing a service. But yeah, please stop me before I lose all friends. And yeah, anyway.
Incredible. Great recommendations.
Thank you. Yeah. Tell us what you think about those recommendations. But I think that's going to do it for my suggestions, which I think brings us to the end of the episode.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think that entails you sharing your commander for next week.
Yeah, we know what that means. Time for the big reveal.
Let's go.
I am excited to share with you an Is It deck.
Stop.
Is it? Or, it is.
Okay.
Is it a Spellslinger deck? It is not.
Okay. Is it not Spellslinger? Wait. I'm not saying is it not. Damn it, Chris. Bleep that out.
We got all tied up there. And you know who else is going to do some tying up? Nin the Pain Artist. Nin the Pain Artist is blue and a red for a legendary creature. Vidalcan Wizard. Has an activated ability. X blue-red and tap. Nin the Pain Artist deals X damage to target creature. That creature's controller draws X cards. It's a 1/1. So Nin the Pain Artist can go in a couple of different ways. The way that I decided to build it is with cards such as the Locust God, legendary creature god for 4, a blue and a red with flying. Whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. 2, a blue and a red, draw a card, then discard a card. When the Locust God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. It's a 4/4, which means when you make that first insect after your draw step, and then you dump all of your mana into Nin
To do damage,
to the insect token,
you're creating
however many cards that is, and however many insects that are hasty that get in there, and then you do it again the next turn, and they're multiplying.
if you even need a next turn at that point. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for this.
Cool.
Yeah, I hope you're excited to play against that.
Yet to be determined. Well, let's see what I'll be playing.
Our overlap is just so eerie. But we don't plan. I have no idea what his cards are going to be.
It's a mystery. I have no idea.
I didn't end up going Is It, but I did double down on mono red.
Oh, fun. Oh, boy.
More specifically, you're going to go on a little dance with Thelon Wildmage next game, which is 3 and a red for a legendary creature, Elf Shaman. Whenever Thelon Wildmage attacks, choose target creature you control and then roll a d20, because this is Magic the Gathering meets Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons. If you roll a 1 through 14, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it has exile this creature at the end of combat. However, if you roll a 15 to 20, create one of those tokens and you can roll again.
Nice.
It's a 3/2. So
That's...
yeah,
That's so cool. Like, you can, all you need is like one good target, right? And then you're making multiple copies of that to attack with. Very mono red things.
Mono red, but also just a little bit of luck, a little bit of rolling the dice. You know, that's never hurt anybody before.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun, rolling the dice. I like that D&D set for that reason. Very cool.
But
so how does it work?
I'd be remiss not to share an example of a card you might want to use that trigger on. Relic Robber is 2 and a red for a creature goblin rogue with haste that reads, whenever Relic Robber deals combat damage to a player, that player creates a 0/1 colorless goblin construct artifact creature token with this creature can't block, and at the beginning of your upkeep, this creature deals 1 damage to you. It's a 2/2.
Oof. Speaking of inevitability, how many copies of that do you need to start taking out opponents?
Yeah, so we both built Stop Hitting Yourself decks.